Today I'm going to do a little bit of video on agnostic atheism and the concepts of God, because I've heard a lot of people out there claiming that they know that there is no God when God itself is an abstract concept with no real physical relevance or reference. So I'm just going to go over the concepts. I'll start with theism, monotheistic liberal God, the literal God. Uh, it's the most extreme mix of religion and God, and most of the monotheistic religions have these. Premise 1, God exists. Premise 2, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere at once. Premise 3, religious text is literal and historical. Premise 4, the believer is a personal messenger and enforcer of God and his or her rules. Premise 5, all those who believe otherwise are evil. Premise 1, that the personal God exists. If this were really true, then everybody would have the same understanding of this personal God. So premise 1 is flawed because of the diversity of religion, even among the monotheistic religion. Premise 2, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere. This is logically impossible. You cannot be everywhere all at once. There's still some debate over the omnipotence, but I still find it to be very illogical. The premise 3, the religious text is literal and historical. Look over any historical text and citing science to any form of theism getting in, saying that it has science, is crap, because for even like the Bible, there is a line in the Bible that says that insects have 4 legs. So premise 3 is also flawed and false. The believer is a personal messenger and enforcer of God's rules, in his and her rules, whatever. What this basically means is that they get to go out and be tyrants on everybody else who does not believe what they believe. And premise 5 gives them justification for that. All of this is highly illogical and highly immoral. The next one is the concept of the conceptual monotheistic God. This belief normally correlates to the turning the text into metaphors, the things that are said in the text into metaphors, and not taking it literally. Premise 1, a personal God exists. I've already defeated that one once. God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere. I have defeated that one in the last one. The religious text is interpreted as metaphorical. Now this is where I can see a little bit of sense, because I can look at any religious text and enjoy it as literature and take its metaphorical means and try to find some kind of moral or greater understanding, and though there are not many more greater understandings that we're going to get out of most of the religions that exist today. Premise 4, God's laws can and do change as humanity grows. Yeah, it's obvious it has to. Premise 5, all those who believe otherwise are not evil for those beliefs. For the conceptual God belief to continue to exist, it must change itself it must change its morality and logic of the time. Some of these people do follow the golden rule, and they would not normally commit horrifying acts based on their religion, and not all of them push that others that should believe as they do. The conclusion to this is that they are moderately illogical and relatively moral. And then we go on to the literal pagan God. And there are very few people who still hold this position, but it is still a concept that is held. Premise 1 through 5 are all the monotheistic literal interpretations. And then you have the premise like demigods are real. Premise 7, gods and demigods interact directly with the world. I don't even have to say anything to this because this is obviously not real, but it's still a concept of God, and there are some who still hold this concept. There are also so many more premises depending on which pagan religion that you're looking at that it is just ridiculous and almost impossible to narrow down and put into the literal paganistic religions thing. I mean, there's just so much, and a lot of it just isn't true. Like being able to cast lightning from your hand without tools, like Thor or Zeus could. And their morals range very, very wildly. So the conclusion is that they are highly illogical, but there's too much diversity to draw a single conclusion on all of their moralistic sense, because there are just so many pagan religions and so many different sects. But for the small majority of them, they are normally highly immoral. The conceptual pagan god. There are many variations of these, but I just wanted to put out the basic premises. Premise 1, gods or God, gods do exist. Gods are not all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere. Premise 3, religion texts are taken in a metaphorical sense. Premise 4, gods can, I didn't add that, gods can equal concepts in a paganistic form, because it is all metaphorical to begin with. For example, the electromagnetic force could equal Thor or Zeus. They're not saying that Thor or Zeus is the cause, but the force itself is Thor or Zeus. And premise 5, a lot of these kinds of religion have a reverence for the natural world, which I can relate to. Now, the conclusion is the obvious disconnect with common terms leads to misunderstanding. When one person starts talking about Thor and I'm talking about electromagnetism, we're going to talk past each other, because he's talking about something that I don't understand. He has to define what he thinks Thor is. So it's not entirely illogical, and it is moderately moral. Now to go over deism a little bit. There are people who do believe in a personal God and are deists at the same time. Personal God, self-explanatory. Premise 1, God exists. Premise 2, God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere. Premise 3, God is personal to each individual. Religious texts are not needed. The belief that God can be personal, but religion is human ego. God is also the creator and sometimes a literal person to the believer, but they normally don't describe to any doctrine of faith base. The conclusion is they're moderately illogical and possibly a bit more moral. The impersonal God, which is the minimalist deist position, they have the smallest amount of premises. Premise 1, God exists. Premise 2, God is the first cause. There's not a whole lot that we can judge on this, because we don't quite yet know the first cause, so we can say in this sense that possibly God exists, and the possibility is much greater than that of any theistic God. But to me, it's not completely logical, because we don't see any evidence for it, and if a God that exists, the universe wouldn't be any different than it is now. And to believe in an impersonal God normally has little to no effect on morality of the person. This is the one that I was introduced to a few years ago, when I used to say all gods didn't exist. It was impossible. This is the concept of God literally equaling the universe, or pantheism. Very few people do describe to this view, but quite a few very intelligent people did. The premises are: premise 1, the universe exists. Premise 2, God is the universe. Literally, God is the universe. Everything within the universe is a part of God. Premise 3, God exists. Conclusion: this is an actually logically sound argument. It has a small effect on morality for the beauty of the God or the universe, whatever you want to call it. So in this sense, I can come up with the conclusion that it is logical, and it has little effect on morality, but it can. If the in particular person reverences on the universe. The overall conclusion is that almost all of these concepts of God are illogical, but not all of them. Even as an atheist, there is the pantheist view that I could subscribe to logically. This is why I must be an agnostic atheist, an unknowing atheist. I shouldn't even use the word agnostic, because it's got no bad rep. So the concept behind agnostic is the not knowing atheist. And I have to ask, which God do you mean? How do you mean God when you say it? Because God has no physical reference to the world. It's not like I can point at a tree and say, that's tree. Yeah, everybody's got a concept for tree. When we say God, you don't have a huge consensus on what God means. So that's all I have to say in this video. I mean, like I said, theistic gods are easy to disprove. When we start getting into like pantheism and the deistic, it's not so. There's a lot more gray that comes in. So this is Darkanus signing off and saying, do your research, look at the data, and make your own decisions.